Good morning, all. As we enter into this virtual service, please note that you have been muted by our host. Also, be advised that our services are being recorded and, with the exception of joys and concerns, will be published online. Finally, if you wish, take a quick moment to arrange your own chalice at home. Justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. Allow me to repeat. Justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. Those words by Dr. Cornel West. I invite you to light your own chalice and place it where it can be seen by all of us if you are able. The chalice is lit in our hearts each time that we pray for vision, long for healing, forgive our enemies, comfort our neighbors, and prepare for justice's day. In its light, our hope and compassion are renewed, and the covenantal ties that bind each to all become clear. Now, by its sacred flame, the path before us is brightened. Love prepares our way. Harmony is in view. There is no east or west, no south or north, only a world to greet and bless with more light still. Now that our chalice is lit, I ask that you please join with me in a moment of silence and prayer in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind our participants to leave yourselves muted. However, we want you and whoever is with you to sing with Mary and Jan as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. So let's all sing the opening hymn, Circle Round for Freedom, number 155.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle
Thank you, Mary and Jan, for the prayer prelude and that beautiful hymn. Good morning, all. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of Cambria. We're glad you've joined us today. We acknowledge that our UUCC sanctuary, which we're not in except for a few of us today, but it stands on land that has been and still is inhabited by coastal Chumash and Salinan indigenous peoples, whose ancestors lived primarily in the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation inviting speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest to our community that connect with the UU 7 principles. Today's service centers around the proposed 8th principle, which reads, "We affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." Our existing 7 principles imply this 8th principle, but do not explicitly hold us accountable for addressing oppressions directly, especially at the systemic level. Beloved community happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, abilities, sexual orientation, backgrounds, and identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within the community and in the broader world. We will be focusing on the meaning and significance of this proposed 8th principle this entire morning. My name is Andy Feigin, and I am your worship associate this morning. I'd like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you joined us. If you're not on our mailing list, please visit our website at uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all of our activities. And please check out What's Happening, a weekly e-blast sent to all our members and friends. This is a great way to keep up with the latest news in our community. As a reminder, if you wish to see this or any of our past Zoom services again, recordings of these services can be found on the UUCC website and Facebook as well. The membership committee invites non-members to consider joining our community. Please contact Diane DeMarco or a person on the board if you are interested. So again, good morning and welcome to everyone. Our affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of our community as well as a promise we make and aspire to. Let us now recite the affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Announcements. We set aside this time for any short announcements that would be of interest to our UU community members and friends. Please keep your items short and to the point. For any items that need more explanation, please call or email the person after the service to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand or your Zoom hand, and when Diane calls your name, please unmute yourself, then speak. Starting in the sanctuary, Jan, I see Jan has her hand raised.
I do. This announcement is regarding the scholarship committee and the scholarship program. We have our meeting on Thursday to determine our candidates, our top 5 candidates, because that's how much we have funds for. We would love to be able to fund 2 more students if possible. So if you would like to contribute to this worthy fund, you can make a check out to UUCC, but put in the memo line scholarship fund. And thank you for your contributions.
Thank you, Jan. I see Randy in the sanctuary has his hand raised.
Yes, I have 2 announcements. The first one is tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Our monthly worship committee is meeting via Zoom, so please be there, all you people on the worship committee. And if you're interested in attending as well, if you're not part of the committee, please notify me, send me an email, and I'll give you the link, and we'd love to have you on board. So everyone's welcome. 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. My second announcement is regarding the Summer Sermons by Other People series, which is going to take place in August. And we want to have other people in our community deliver someone's sermon other than those who have already done so. So if I can't get any volunteers, we're going to have to take another route here. So please, if you have not done this before, we'd love to have you get up on the pulpit and deliver someone's sermon. And we'll even help you find one if you're interested in doing this, or if you know of a sermon that you would like to deliver, we would really be appreciative of having you step forward with it. So again, notify me if you're interested in participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. All right, Diane, over to you for Zoom participants.
Okay, Janet, would you unmute, please, and tell us your announcement?
Okay, thank you, Diane. Yeah, just a reminder, today is 4th Sunday. It's our second collection for the food bank. So please remember that when the offering comes around today. The food bank is very appreciative of all of our donations, and they continue to supply nutritious food to our members of the community who are struggling. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. I have an announcement. I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved with our covenant meeting yesterday. Much appreciative of all the exchanges that were made, and we're going to have our next covenant meeting March 26th at 1 o'clock. March 26th at 1 o'clock. It will go out in the newsletter, and we invite you all, members and pledging friends, to please attend. And that looks like about it, Andy. Back to you.
Okay, thanks. Next week, Rebecca Hendricks will present We Are All Living on First Peoples Land,
Nancy
Indigenous.
Tolan had a announcement. Nancy does.
Oh, sorry. Well, let me just finish. Next week, it'll be We Are All Living on First Peoples Land, Indigenous Land Acknowledgements. And now Nancy has an announcement.
Sorry, I decided I would put it in joys and concerns, and my concern is that how forgetful I am that I didn't tell you all, because I guess I didn't even put it in the newsletter that our next moving towards racial justice discussion group is the second Wednesday. I don't know what day that is, in March, and we're talking about the next 4 days in the Me and White Supremacy book, and just contact me if you want the details. Everybody's and anybody is welcome.
9th of March.
It's the 9th of March. Okay. So
9th of March. Thank you, Nancy. And anybody else for announcements? No? Okay, so once again, next week, Rebecca Hendricks will present We Are All Living on First Peoples Land, Indigenous Land Acknowledgements. That'll be March 6th, next Sunday. Sharing together some of our personal and significant joys and concerns brings us closer as a faith community. We invite you to share the milestones that are deeply felt as a part of your personal life, but please be mindful and considerate of all who come to worship with us this morning. This is a time of community building. The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and sorrows which may have gone unspoken today but are also deeply felt in our community. Now, let us enter a place of peace and serenity where you are one with your spiritual being. Please be at peace within your space where the absence of all that is temporal is its most cherished gift. Let us enter the stillness. Spirit of life, help us to find our way through the turmoil that turns people against each other instead of turning toward each other in love. Help us to see that little good ever comes out of viewing each other as the other. Only when we find our common humanity can we coexist peacefully and with loving kindness. Solani Kuchela wrote that prayer. Today's congregational circle is titled UUCC and the Eighth Principle. Before we get into the meaning and significance of the eighth principle, let me just share a bit of the mechanics involved. A draft of the eighth principle was first written in 2013 by Bruce Pollock Johnson and Reverend Paula Cole Jones, and was recommended to the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, for adoption in 2017. Individual UU congregations, next slide please, have been adopting the eighth principle for themselves while its adoption by the UUA works its way upwards through the association's governing bodies. Next slide. Here are the names of 125 congregations which, as of December 2021, after serious consideration, have voted to adopt the eighth principle. And according to the eighth principle UU Learning Community on Facebook, which I recommend to any of you interested, it's available and you can join, the eighth principle UU Learning Community, as of January 23rd, the number has climbed to 155, 30 more, sorry. It's my hope, next slide, thank you. It's my hope that our congregation seriously consider adopting, along with the current 7 principles, this eighth principle into our covenant. As part of the process, you hopefully recall that back in May of last year, Everett Thompson presented a moving talk entitled, "What's Love Got to Do with It? Side with Love and the Eighth Principle," remember? And today's circle is another step in the process. Unitarian Universalism has great potential for building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community as envisioned by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and could experience tremendous diversification, vitality, and thriving if it works to embody this vision. But it won't happen without conscious awareness and effort on our part. Dismantling racism, white supremacy, and other oppressions requires work at the personal and institutional levels. The UU principles were designed to be dynamic, not a fixed creed. It means we want to always continue to be educating ourselves, exploring truth, and raising our consciousness. When we get to a new level of understanding and clarity, our structure makes it possible to reflect that. The UUA is founded on bylaws. They are readily available on the UUA website, but few of us have ever studied them. As I stated in the email blast that was sent out last Tuesday, Article 2, entitled Principles and Purposes, is the section of the UUA bylaws which spells out the 7 principles we covenant to affirm and promote. There they are. Indeed, this section of Article 2 is referred to as the UUA's covenant. Every so often, the UUA appoints a study commission to review Article 2 in order to consider updating it. Next slide, please. In a panel discussion entitled A Conversation on Covenant, an Article 2 Study Commission panel, which took place a couple of years ago, it was stated, quote, "There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, not their specific wording, nor in the way Article 2 is laid out," end quote. In other words, all of these things can evolve as we evolve, with every generation, every era. Unitarian Universalism is the only religion that intentionally builds in that flexibility to acknowledge the importance of ongoing revealed truth. Next slide, please. This happened when environmental awareness reached a critical mass and got added as the 7th principle, although it is also has multicultural implications. We are approaching a similar critical mass level of awareness with the systemic nature of racism and other oppressions. None of the other principles mentions love. By having beloved community in the 8th principle, it brings our commitment to love higher in our consciousness, consistent with our Side with Love campaign. The 8th principle is really just the beginning of action, rather than the ultimate goal. Let's make our actions match our values. Let's be a UU movement that feeds them. That would be spiritual wholeness. Okay, you've heard enough from me now. I would like to ask that you share your thoughts and feelings with the circle or rectangle on Zoom here. Please keep your comments concise and to the point so that as many folks as possible can speak in the time we have available. If you would like to contribute, please raise your hand or your Zoom hand, and I will call on you. The floor is open. Hank, I see your hand is raised. Please unmute yourself.
Okay. When I read this, I'm just a little bit put off by its obtuseness or its flowery wording to a degree. I know that can't be changed, I guess, but that bothers me. it's not a direct statement. It's so indirect as to question its purpose to me, that a lot of these ideas and principles already exist in, I think, our community. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. Ted, you were next to raise your hand. Maybe we can help you.
There we go. Sorry,
Thank you.
I'm on my phone. I'm not used to this. You know, my suspicion is that, and maybe I'm wrong, but it appears as though this is a work in progress. I'm suspecting that there will be some wordsmithing that goes on. What it really sounds like to me is a call to action, and I think that's a good thing, personally. But I'd like to point that out, that I think this is, you know, as a covenant, you know, when you adopt a perspective, there is I think an implied call to action, and I see that here, and I think it's a good thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Lou, your hand was next up on the list.
Yeah, thank you. And Andy, that was a very clear introduction. I thank you for that. I totally agree with Hank. I've been thinking the same thing. I read over the first 7 principles. They're all incredibly straightforward, clearly stated, concise, using simple, understandable words. And the way this 8th one is written just stands out as being different for exactly the reasons that Hank said. And, you know, I went through it and I didn't spend a lot of time, but I found ways to cut out a bunch of words that just didn't seem necessary and made it more consistent with the other principles and being so simply stated. And I'm not sure, contrary to what Ted said, that it would be easy to change, because so many congregations have already approved this. So I'm not against it. I'm just stating my feeling that it doesn't seem to go with the rest of the principles.
Thank you, Lou. Robert or Nancy?
Hello, Nancy here. So I'm fully in favor of working to build a diverse multicultural community and of actively working to dismantle racism and other oppressions. I definitely think it's a call to action. It is different from the other principles, but I don't have any problem with that, you know. But what exactly it means to work to build a diverse multicultural community and actively work to dismantle racism and other oppressions is definitely up to some interpretation. I feel I have taken some small steps towards dismantling racism in this congregation by giving a sermon about reparations and by starting the Moving Towards Racial Justice discussion group, which still meets monthly after a year and a half. I learned so much from this group and everyone in the group, and they keep me accountable and engaged in the process. I know if I had just done this on my own, I would have probably stopped actively working months ago. I think that none of us considers ourselves prejudiced. Speaking for myself, I have never considered myself racist in any way. I would point to my Black, Latinx, and Asian roommates, the guys I dated who were Black, Asian, or Latino, and say, you know, this doesn't apply to me. I'm not a racist. I'm not prejudiced. And furthermore, I grew up with a very proud Mexican American mother who spoke Spanish daily. I have 26 of my 30 cousins have Spanish surnames. Some of them live in Mexico and spent long stretches with my family. I have self-identified as Mexican since childhood, and it was definitely not a positive thing to be back then. So how could I be prejudiced? So this is really a perfect example of white exceptionalism. It doesn't apply to me, you're right. But, but that's how I thought until George Floyd was murdered. And I decided to look into this whole racism thing. And it has been very eye-opening. While I knew I looked white, I had no idea what white privilege really was. I had been learning about white fragility, redlining, the real causes of the wealth gap, microaggressions, tone policing, and so on and so on. I am grateful for the support and wisdom of my fellow congregants who join me monthly to discuss racial justice. It's not a pleasant journey, but it is important work and very enlightening. And I hope, well, that's what I think is some of what the eighth principle demands of us, but people have their own interpretations. And, I think the fact that we are, as a congregation, we work with food distribution, which is largely to Latinx people, and the scholarship committee also helps serve the Latinx community in large part, and other immigrants, I believe. But that's my thought.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for your leadership of the Moving Toward Racial Justice discussion group. That's been important. I have some written comments from Catherine Lekich, which I'll add later. She wasn't able to join us today as the head of but she's the head of the Social Justice Committee. Next up in the hands raised is Mary Schwabe.
Can you hear me? Am I muted? How do we fix
Go ahead,
this?
speak.
I'm speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hi. I'm going to close this now, so that's not there. Hi. Thank you, Nancy. I really appreciated what you, as our leader of our Moving Toward Social Justice, Racial Justice group leader, I appreciate what you're doing. Yes, it has been hard work. I will testify to that. And it continues to be hard work and necessary work. I think in studying these oppressions that happen in the world, we learn more about each other and how to become more loving toward each other. And I think that we have to do that. We have to start with our little circle, and then it'll blossom and move out. And then we might attract people that look different than we do, but we're not going to now. But that's not why I raised my hand. I raised my hand to just explain a couple things about the way the proposed principle is worded. 2 years ago, it came to a vote, I believe, at a GA, and it narrowly missed passing. And every 15 years, there's a commission that's brought together to consider the principles, and this is what they're doing right now. So, but the commission that has come together is asking member congregations and individuals to send recommendations. They have a survey. I don't have a link for it, but you can find it at UUA, I'm sure, pretty easily. And you can, Hank, and you can, Lou, make suggestions for wording. And you are one person, it won't make a difference, but at least you'll have your democratic right. You'll be able to use your democratic voice. Thank you. Yeah. And that's what this is all about. And it's very important, and the UUA is aware of that. And so please go to UUA and partake. It's really important. It's important work that we do, and we will continue doing that work. This is not going to make us any different than we are today if we say we agree with this, if we adopt it as UUCC. We still have to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Jeff, you're next up, but I just let me interrupt for a moment I said I would discuss the mechanics. I didn't really cover all of it. Um, we're in the midst of discussing this. Many of the congregations that have adopted it have taken months, if not years, of discussion and study before they've chosen to adopt it. And maybe many have also done what Mary suggested. Maybe they've written in and said, provided their own, they have chosen not to adopt this version, but they've worked on their own. So we have every right to go through our process. We're not in any, other than the fact that the issues are important, we don't have to feel hurried to come to a conclusion of hopefully eventually we will get to a point where we vote on something, but we're in the process, and the process is the journey is as important as the goal. And that's a perfect segue to Jeff. So go ahead, Jeff, because you and I talked about this last night.
We did? I'm glad
The
we did, but I don't remember.
About the journey and versus
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think we were talking about the divine in particular, but this is more specific to humanity, I think, and our frailty and shortcomings. At any rate, I originally was listening to Hank and going, "What do you mean, Hank? What do you mean you don't like it?" But I get his point. It's kind of flowery. It's not as direct, and I think it should be more direct. I agree with him on that. I also agree with a lot of people who are like, what are we going to do about it anyway? They've already voted and pretty much adopted. And the other point that you just made, Andy, about the fact that people have deliberated over this for such a long time, and that we have at least got something in there that talks about the idea of racism, which is a huge, painful issue, I think, for all of us. And I was involved in a panel discussion about racism at a convention that I really enjoy going to, and unfortunately has concluded, at least in its former incarnation at this point, and has kind of started up as another sort of group that I joined this year called Mystical Minds. The former group was called Pantheacon, which was like the Pantheacon of, or the pantheon of all gods and all that kind of stuff, and all sorts of religions and points of view. At any rate, I was with a panel that was part of what was called at that time the POC, or presented by them, which was the people of color. And one of the things that they asked us to do, which I thought was definitely worthwhile, but didn't realize how painful it might be, not only for some people, but on thinking about it after I had said what I had said and was asked to say, did some soul searching myself and found more about it within myself than I thought I would ever realize. And I can suggest that people at least follow what I had to do, because the group asked me to do it. The people of color asked me to say and stand up, especially if I was white, and say that I am a racist. That's a big deal, especially if you're a person who doesn't believe that of themselves, because you have fought against it and you really hate racism, which I do. But just by being white, you are, especially in the United States, a person who has grown up in a culture that if you are white, you are shielded from and coddled by a system that privileges you, whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not. And these are racist things. And I have benefited by the racism of this country more than my Black friends, most definitely more. And they have been involved in huge oppression and pain, literally denied for generations, not just a lifetime, but many lifetimes, the ability to be seen as a human being, just as a human being, someone who is at least your equal. And that is hugely evil, I think. That kind of oppression. And we're seeing it being played out with the Ukrainians as well. One of the tools that that Vladimir Putin, and I don't say the Russians because I don't believe this is anything but Vladimir Putin's war. I think this is the war of a dictator, an oppressor, a man who cares not about people at all, and is only interested in personal gain, much like one of the former presidents I think we just had. They seem to like each other as well. So I think the real root of many of our evils is in fact racism, and I think it should be stated more directly, as Hank was saying. I'm not quite sure how I would put it, but I think, yeah, it being flowery rather than direct needs to be fixed. But the fact that it's there, I'm very happy for.
Thank you,
At any
Jeff.
rate, yeah, I'm going to end it there, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Randy's hand is raised. Dolores, I don't know who raised it first, but I saw Dolores first. So please go ahead, Dolores, and then Randy, you, and we'll see how much we have. 5 minutes left for the conversation, technically. So Dolores, go ahead.
Mine's short. I'm all for this. I think the wording should not be a particular hang up. I think this will cause us to focus on what this is all about, right? This is our 8th principle, and we'll start looking at that, you know, from a congregation standpoint, from a UUA standpoint, and it's overdue, like so many of you have said. And we need to get on with it. What are we waiting for? I mean, how much longer? 400 more years, maybe, huh? You know, it's enough already. So I'm all for it.
Thank you, Dolores. Randy from the sanctuary. Unmute something.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. This proposed principle not only calls for action, but accountable action. My proposed business plan approach to our upcoming retreat was rejected because it was too businesslike. It is structured with an emphasis on accountability in order to assure things get done. But now we are proposing to include the word accountably in our principles. And I wonder about that. With a call to action, you should have accountability through metrics. In other words, establish some system of measurement so you know that things are progressing towards what the action should accomplish, and that you're staying on course. Who's going to do this? How is that going to happen? And I think this is a concern maybe indirectly voiced by those talking earlier today, and that's one of my concerns. Overall, I like this principle up to the phrase beloved community.
Oh. Whoa.
Okay.
I'm done.
Thank you, Randy. I have one thing to say, and then I'll read Kat's statement. What I have to say is, let's be sure, and how do I say it? I don't know if I can say it in a let's be sure that we read these words and this statement not through a white supremacist frame. Let's read this statement through a all people's frame. We don't all speak the same way. And the first 7 principles are written so that they sound really good to white folks. This one sounds really good to maybe more than white folks, and that's part of the deal, a big part of the deal. Think about it. Okay, this is what Kat said, because I wrote to Kat and Nancy in particular, given their leadership roles that overlap this issue. And Nancy's obviously here, and I thank you for your comments. Kat wrote, and I'm just going to quote the parts that really are pertinent. I am very much interested in adopting the 8th principle, though I wish it was written differently. I won't be in church this weekend, regret that. I'm very interested to hear the cons regarding adopting the 8th principle so that I might consider them. And I promised her that we'd be recording this so she could visit the recording, as can we all. The only thing I can think of would be that it requires action according to how it's read. working to build by our actions, quote unquote, and maybe people feel there is little they can do or they want to do. And then she goes on to say that our monthly meeting, Moving Towards Racial Justice group, has the same 7 of us, which is, to me, indicative of people's interest. So that's my 2 cents as someone who won't be there. I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion. I hope, and that she sends her my best to all, Kat. So thank you, Kat, for that. I guess it is about time to wrap it up. Oh, Jeff has a thumbs up. Thank you, Jeff. Just to reiterate, this is an ongoing process. We as individuals and we as a congregation absolutely have to feel strongly before we agree to such a thing, but the congregations that have adopted the 8th principle have decided at some point that it's time for a vote, and we will do that, and we will do that according to the bylaws, which requires, forgive me, Randy, what is it, 3 weeks notice?
Yes.
Okay, so probably the board, in conjunction with anyone else who has input, will agree that the time will eventually come, as Dolores has said, maybe sooner than later, hopefully sooner than later, to have such a vote. We'll notify everybody, which will still give everybody one last chance to think about it and discuss it before we have that vote. So that is the process we are in the midst of. I'll keep everybody informed, and I certainly encourage anyone else who's interested to do your research and share it with all of us. So thank you all for this big step forward. I appreciate it. And now we'll move on to the morning offering, which will now be given and received. Please keep in mind that our congregation is entirely self-governed by the democratic process. One of those privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all of the financial support for our many ministries from among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and our institutional well-being. You are invited to participate in the blessing of giving. Please use one of those methods on the screen. Thank you. My thanks to Mary and Jan for bringing that song to us. A personal note, I stage managed a production of Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris at the South Coast Repertory in Southern California in 1978. And the music is so dear to my heart. And if any of you are not familiar with that song and its lyrics, If We Only Have Love by Jacques Brel, go YouTube it. It's so stirring. Thank you for all the gifts given and received for the work of this community. And now, let's sing the doxology. Now please join in singing the closing hymn for all that is our life, number 128. Thanks once again. The flame of this chalice will no longer burn today, but the light of the flame within our hearts continues to shine brightly, illuminating the love felt in our community. Please extinguish your chalice at home now. After the benediction, please select the gallery view, but please remain muted. If you have a comment, I'll call on you when you raise your Zoom hand or your hand there in the sanctuary. Our benediction is entitled Wholehearted and Unafraid by Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. Wholehearted and unafraid. I do not need you to prove your flawlessness, to convince me you are an exemplary or even competent. I have given up on perfection as a means to anything, especially love. I do not long for unparalleled greatness, phenomenal talent, or the always adequate. I no longer search for immaculate containers to hold anything, especially goodness. I have become ready to be faithful to the broken, the damaged, and surviving the ones unfit to wield anything but humanness and hope in the face of what hungers to do harm and destroy. I have become one of the many who by breaking have become wholehearted, no longer afraid to join the cause of imperfection, and revel in the heartbeat rhythm of the unfinished, the unrelenting, who keep trying, keep going, keep forgiving, keep returning to each other. Amen. Blessed be.